Hello. All right, we shall start. Okay. Hello and welcome to the 11th episode of ACK&Freinds, where we bring to you the best of Indian kids literature. Amar Chitra Katha has been telling stories from India to children for about 53 years, and a lot of it is the literature that was solely written for children. And today, there are a lot of wonderful authors who are writing joyful and important stories, and we hope to give you a sneak peek into this delightful world. Today, we have with us Natasha Sharma, who is one of India's most well-known children's authors with 21 books to her name. Her popular books, Icky, Yucky, Mucky, and Kaka and Munni, have been performed at various literary events across the country. She's here to talk to us about her superbly fun history mystery series, and in that, the first book in the series, Akbar and the Tricky Traitor. So please welcome Natasha. Hi, Natasha.
Hi, Sanjana. Thank you for having me over today. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Yay. All right. So we are very excited to have you. We were rejoicing when you said you agreed to come on and talk to us. So thank you. And we love the History Mystery series. Of course, we'll get to that in a bit.
Sure.
But I wanted to start right at the beginning. And you've done a whole lot of stuff before you started writing for children. And
yes.
So tell us about the first book, because just by the name, you want to read it, because it's Icky, Yucky, Mucky, and that happened in 2011. So
2011,
tell us
yeah.
Yes, tell us.
Okay, so Icky, Yucky, Mucky actually was my first book. I did write a few before that, which didn't go anywhere, but they gave me a taste into really knowing that this is what I want to do in all my years ahead. And Icky, Yucky, Mucky actually had a very different form when I started out. I had this thought of horrible habits, terrible habits that not just children, but even adults have, to be completely honest. And I wrote them as 5 poems, one on each habit, because at that point of time, when I started out writing, I was sort of stuck in this little bit of a groove that I will only write in verse. And I happened to attend this publishing workshop at the Kala Ghora Literature Festival, aptly called How to Get Published. And it was being conducted by Anita Roy, who was the editor of Young Zuban at the time. And I went up to her and I told her, well, I've got this collection. And I think she loved the name. So she said, well, send it to me. And so she told me that it doesn't work as poetry, but I love the concept and the idea, so put it into a story. And that's really where it turned into the story of Maharaja Icky, who has the most terrible table manners, and then who goes on to marry Maharani Yucky, who nibbles her nails and spits them out. And then they go on to have Princess Mucky, and I shall not tell you what happens with her, but I will leave it to your most horrible imagination to think of what possibly she could be doing. That could be worse than all these things.
Well, it's no wonder that everyone, like all the kids, love this book. I mean, what's there not to love? But
it's my standard icebreaker when I start a session, because I just have to begin the session with, Maharaja Icky proclaimed that the only way to eat curry is to let the gravy flow and to lick it from hand to elbow. And I have them eating out of my hand, if I can even say that metaphor. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds brilliant. And so when most writers are starting out, and a lot of people, especially in the arts field, have a lot of self-doubt. You're always second guessing whether what you're writing is even sounding good, and you want most people. So when were you sure? When did you feel really sure that this is what you wanted to do, right, for children?
So as I mentioned, when I started writing, I wrote a couple of stories. I showed them around. They didn't really go anywhere. But I think they gave me a taste into the whole exercise of writing for children. And then when I looked at Icky Yucky, when I wrote Icky Yucky Mucky, and I had to take a re-look at it, somewhere something clicks at that point of time that I'm having a lot of fun with this. And I think when your work becomes fun and you wake up wanting to sit at your table every day to do something, you know that you're in the right place. So that, I think at that point, it really got me into this groove that I need to understand the technicality of writing for children better. So I attended a few workshops, I did online courses, I read up books on the same. And then I actually went and literally sat in libraries and bookstores and went through the best that I was there and understood what the book is saying and what's really, the best of the best are doing. So I think it started there. But on the question of on the topic of self-doubt, I don't think it ever goes away. 21 books or not, there's always self-doubt. I throw the self-doubt out of the window when I actually begin writing. So when I'm in the middle of my writing, there's no space for self-doubt at that point. I just go with it. But when I finish writing and I have to send that manuscript to an editor, oh my God, then it is completely nerve-wracking, and it really, I have my heart pounding, and it takes me a few days or weeks to be able to press send. So that moment of self-doubt never goes away.
Yeah, no, I can completely imagine. And so, like I mentioned, there are a lot of Indian authors and some great creators like illustrators and writers for children in India that are doing some really wonderful stuff. But at the end of the day, parents are still buying a lot of the more popular stuff and a lot of the foreign stuff. And so we as the kidlit community, what can we do to help bridge that gap and make basically?
I think that's something really, it's a massive thing ahead that needs to be done. And every time I crib about the fact that, well, books never sell in the numbers that they should sell, and they're great reviews, and children who read it say such positive things. They come up and they remember it even after 7 years. I've had children coming up and telling me, oh, we read your book, Icky, Yucky, Mucky, and all of that. But it's still limited numbers, as you mentioned. And it's really, I think a large issue is discoverability. Indian children's literature is often relegated to one corner of a bookstore with the bulb fused there and cartons of stock lying in front of it. That's the reality. That's the ground reality. But when I crib about it, the first thing I'm always told by the stalwarts who've been writing for many years is, well, it's much better than what it was when we started out. So that's one thing to be thankful and hopeful for. But I think a couple of things. Where discoverability is concerned, I think we seriously lack good, well-established, well-known review spaces. That's really one of the differentiators you find with the international market and here. So to be able to get the word out, you need people in mainstream media, some of the large media houses, as well as bloggers and many others. It takes an entire village to, build this. But I think those big review spaces are sorely missing, which give regular reviews, which give lists based on different, say, themes or different ideas. The literature festivals have really helped to that extent, whether it's Bookaroo or any of the others. I think also I think for people to get to know, that's one big thing. School libraries are now beginning to evolve and change. So I'm hopeful that over time, that also helps as authors go into these schools and are able to speak more. The books are stocked in the libraries and are actually highlighted. Hopefully that will help. I think the industry as overall, if you just look at the remuneration that a creator gets, it's really small, it's insignificant, you can't survive on it. So I think there needs to be some methodology where that improves, both in terms of what you actually get for a book, as well as the acknowledgement you get when you go and do these sessions. So whether it's in schools or at the end of the day, it's a person's time and effort. It's not just about us selling a book, it's about getting a child really enthused about reading, which is the ultimate goal for everyone. So I think those are some of the things that really need to be looked at within the industry to help it come together and to help it grow. Just top of the mind, I think those are some of the things I would say are really important.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. So moving on to what we are here to talk about today, the History Mystery series. You've written five books in this series, and a lot of historical fiction is written for kids. And and it's actually, this was fresh. I loved reading this. And just for everybody watching, this is the History Mystery series. It's the first book in the series, Akbar and the Tricky Traitor. There are 5 in total, and this was published by Duckbill, which is now part of Penguin Random House, and has been illustrated by Vandana Bisht. So tell us a little bit about how you balance the historical setting with a contemporary voice and make it sound so exciting for kids.
Okay.
How?
So I'm going to actually take a step further back, if you're okay with that,
Yes,
and
yes.
tell you the origin of this, because I think that really created the voice for this story, this series. So the story of Akbar that I wrote, it was the first in the series. It grew out of a writing workshop that Duckbill conducted, and which I attended in Mumbai. It was a 3-day workshop, and one of the things it said was, one of the exercises in this workshop was that pick a genre that you've never written in or considered writing in. So I picked historical fiction because I'd really never considered writing historical fiction up till then. And then they said that, well, they came around with this black bag and they said, you can't look in, and you put your hand in and pull something out. So I put my hand in and out popped a sock. I don't know why they threw a sock in, but there was a sock, and I now had to write historical fiction with some key feature as a sock, or at least as an extension, feet, footsteps, something like that. So when you read for the people listening in, when you read the book, you'll understand the connection that there is of Akbar and the tricky traitor and footsteps in the story. But that's where it began. And I decided to write for 8 to 12-year-olds, take this, and I grew with, went running with this idea. And I tend to write with, I think my natural voice is humor. So just to bring it back, I wrote the story with my natural voice of humor coming through, and as a very basic sketch. It was in a workshop, and that when they read it, they said that they'd like to consider it as a full book, which then grew into a series, of course. But what I tend to do to be able to balance the two, as you asked, is I do a lot of research, a ton of research, and I don't write while I'm doing the research. The research could go on for as long as 6 months. I just make notes, and I try and dig out things that children will never get to read in their school history textbooks. The fun bits of history that are, for some reason, always left out when they're teaching us history in school. But I was writing historical fiction. But I do need the setting and the background, and I do need that, the weight of history to sort of weigh into the story. So at the end of 6 months, along the way, I keep noting down things which I think I can weave into the plot or the character, and then I just put all this aside. And the crucial thing for me is I don't want to force fit bits of information, because that just takes the joy away from the storytelling, and therefore for the reader as well. So I begin then writing, just having a lot of fun. I just have a lot of fun when I'm writing the history mysteries. I try and come up with interesting names for each one of them. There's a certain theme for a group theme running through the series. And I use that setting and all the research I've done as the base to give the historical base, and the voice becomes more contemporary. And I think the two have, therefore, because it began like that, it's been fairly effortless for me while I'm writing it. And I do hope that's how it comes across to the reader as well.
Yeah, it certainly does. Yeah. So talking about research, since you mentioned it, what kind of research goes into writing something like this? And what are some of the really cool things that you found about the...
You mentioned there's Akbar, of course, Akbar and the Tricky Traitor. I have all of them, and each one has had different forms of research that have happened. There's Razia and the Pesky Presents. There's Raja and the Swapped Sacks. Shah Jahan and the Ruby Robber. And there's Ashoka and the Muddled Messages. And the reason I show you all of these is because there's different kinds of sources available for each. I mean, it's a fairly wide range from Akbar in 200 BC going to the 1500s now. So if I take the example of, say, Akbar or Shah Jahan, there's a lot of architectural references I could get. So if I'm researching the setting of Fatehpur Sikri or Agra Fort or the Taj Mahal, I actually will go to the ASI websites. I'll go to UNESCO World Heritage sites. Luckily enough, I'd been to Agra and Fatehpur Sikri, so I had a context having visited it myself. Then there is a lot of, which is the bulk of my information. I use a lot of old manuscripts which have been translated into English, and luckily there are a lot of digital archives around today. I then, when I have to dig deeper into something, then I look for, say, contemporary writing. If it's the food, there are books written by food historians today, so I read those. So it's a really varied list. It could involve museum visits and all of those things, which then sort of come together to give me the bulk of my research. And I try and use bits and pieces. So if I did, when I wrote Shah Jahan, it was set at the time when the Taj Mahal is being built in the background. And Shah Jahan's capital is still Agra fort, and the Peacock throne is being inaugurated there. So it allowed me 3 very big events to happen. And I did a lot of research on the Taj Mahal and the building of the Taj Mahal. And there's an entire scene set where Dara Shikoh goes to investigate the mystery at hand. And you actually see and read about the different things that are going on, whether it's sorting of stones or the chiseling of the marble and all those things, which then get included in the story. But fun facts, oh my God, there is a entire list. So Akbar, as an example, one of the things I'd love to tell you is that he loved to watch spiders fight. This always tickles the children when I tell them that. So he would take these containers and put 2 spiders in, and then he'd watch as they sort of attack each other to create their space. And the other thing about Akbar, he was super finicky about his water, his drinking water. So, a lot of people had these water tasters because they were always worried that somebody might be trying to poison them. But in addition to that, Akbar, because he was so finicky about his water, he would have, wherever he was, and he had a massive empire, he would get barrels of water filled at Haridwar, get them sealed, and they would come in these long wagons all the way to where he was. And that's the water that he preferred to drink. If I take the Ashoka book, during Mauryan times, peacocks were a delicacy on the royal table. And when I say this, when I go to a school and I say this out to this bunch of, grade 3, grade 4 children, they're like, what? They ate peacocks, and that's our national bird. And I'm like, yeah, but Ashoka also gave you the national symbol and all of those things, right? So it leads into all these discussions about how food has changed over the years, and in Mauryan times they even ate hedgehogs. And I mean that's the final straw. Like, peacocks and hedgehogs, who were these people? Like, did they actually live here where we live today? So there's a lot of those kind of elements that I really try and bring in somewhere. And while I say it's historical fiction, read it as a fictional story. But at the end of every book, there's this, which is my best part, my fun part. It's called fact or fiction.
Yes.
So I always tell the children, it's a fiction story. This is all made up by me. But there are a lot of things which are actually based on facts. And some of the most surprising bits, which you think can't be possible, I mean, this is just her imagination. They're based on facts. So you must read that chapter at the end of it.
Yeah, actually, once I reached the end of the book and I saw that, I was like, I know now. And I went through that really with complete, because I was going to start Googling and looking up and doing my own research based on that. And I was so thankful for that last bit And okay, just before we start reading, if you all have any questions, please put them in the comments and I will ask them. So far, we've not had much. Many people saying that they've read and they have your book and they love your books. So if you could read a little bit from Akbar and the Tricky Traitor.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to read from actually the beginning, the first chapter, and it's called A Weighty Problem. Emperor Akbar was in a foul mood. He was furious, he was fuming, and if you could have poked around inside his head, you would know that he was a wee bit frantic. The Mir Bakawal, master of the kitchen, knew it, for the emperor had barely eaten a bite of his favorite halwa at breakfast. The Mir Saman, head of the imperial household, knew it, for the emperor had slept fitfully without his usual karr fuss snores, shaking the shutters. The Daroga, head of the royal stable, knew it, for Akbar had not fed a carrot to his favorite horse this morning, as he always did. Something was definitely amiss, and the palace trembled with each footstep of the emperor as he stomped around the palace before making his way to his personal chambers. Akbar paced and tut-tutted, waiting for the 5 men to finish with their greeting as they bowed low and moved their hands up and down from floor to forehead. Enough, enough. Look up and listen well, said Akbar. Akbar himself had specially picked the 5 men standing there at attention for their cunning and clever thinking skills. No one else in the kingdom, not even the head of the imperial army, had knowledge of the Super 6. The Super 6 were, as mentioned, 5 in number. As an amazing example of their cleverness, one of them had suggested this name. It will confuse anyone trying to find out about our secret group. They'll all look for 5. They'll all look for 6 people and we'll only be 5, he said, looking amazingly clever. These men had been given many missions in the past by Akbar and had often investigated undercover, dressed as merchants, washermen, cooks, and once even as cows. Before I go any further, I'm going to show you what Vandana drew. So these are the men as cows. I hope you can see that on screen without too much of a reflection. And these are the 5 men that she drew, and that's Akbar out there pacing about. But these are the 5 men who are the Super 6, as I mentioned. Okay, I have summoned you here today, for there is deep and deadly treachery afoot, whispered Akbar. Gasp! Went the 5 Super Sixers, looking suitably horrified. Since the last few weeks, the Maharaja of a nearby kingdom, King Adbhut, seems to know far more than possible about what is going on in my kingdom. He has knowledge of my new invention, my traveling bathroom, when I am yet to use it. This is actually a fact. He knows of Shahpasand, my favorite camel for a camel fight, but it is yesterday's reports from our network of spies that has disturbed me greatly. King Adbhut has been heard sniggering in open court. Oh, the mighty Emperor Akbar appears to be going weak. I have heard of how the Emperor Akbar is weighed against 12 different items every birthday, and those things are given to charity. Well, last week, at the weighing in on his birthday, he seems to have lost 6 kilos from the last weighing. He is either getting feeble or he is becoming a miser and not eating enough before his Salgira. He's had to give away less of the gold, silver, ghee and other stuff that he is weighed against. The emperor, it seems, is either kamzor or kanjoos. With sharp intake of breath and popping eyes, the man exclaimed, Jahanpana, you have lost 6 kilos. Are you well? Salgira Mubarak, what has made you lose so much weight? Did you stop eating rice? My wife keeps telling me to stop eating rice and to lose weight. She has stopped all my rice and my sugar. Do you think it will work, Your Majesty? My weight or your weight is not of concern here, thundered Akbar. I want to know who has been feeding that annoying thorn in my side, King Adbhut, all this information. Of course, Your Highness, there is surely a mole in our midst. We shall search the kingdom and bring this traitor before you, Jahanpana. We shall turn every rock and look under every tree. Just give us the command. I just gave you the command, Bevakoof. And don't go thundering all over the kingdom searching under rocks and trees. The traitor is from within these palace walls, either a courtier or with connections to one. For how else could he have got such information? And how is this information reaching King Adbhut? Go now and search this fiend. Be clever and tread quietly and carefully. Ji Hazur, we shall go right now. We shall dig out the traitor and then we'll bury him, exclaimed the men as they left the chamber. I'm going to stop here with this reading, but that was chapter 1 of Akbar and the Tricky Traitor. I hope you enjoyed that.
Yay, thank you. Thank you so much. I love the Super 6, by the way. That's just, just hilarious. Yeah.
So the Super 6 have actually, sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was saying the Super 6 have actually grown into, without me starting out with that intention, it's become sort of like this pattern. So Ashoka has the tremendous 10, Raja has only 1. So there's alliteration and this little play with words that is fun to always come up with every new book. Yeah. And it's there in all 5 books and also in the 6th, which is actually just gone in for getting illustrated.
Oh, wow.
So there's a 6th book in the offing.
Great.
Yeah.
So, okay, we have a bunch of questions coming in, but before that, okay. I have four quick questions that I ask everybody. So I'm going to ask you those, and then we'll quickly. Yeah, you have to give the first thing that comes to your mind. Just say those. Okay. All right. So the first one is: what was the last Indian children's book you read and loved?
Ooh, I have a few. Can I say 2, 3?
Yeah, sure.
I can think of. So there's this is actually for more older children. It's called Like Smoke by Paru Anand. It's a collection of short stories that I loved, and 2 books which are always top of mind. I've not read them recently, but they're always top of mind, are by Anushka Ravishankar, Captain Coconut and the Case of the Missing Bananas, which is ridiculously funny, and Today is My Day, which is really something that is very close to my heart. So those are the ones that come top of mind.
All right. The next question is that if you had to describe yourself as a genre of literature, what would you pick?
Okay. So it's, I think, a graphic novel.
Wow.
because
yeah.
you know, I think very visually, and I also I mean, when I'm sitting and daydreaming, or even when I have dreams, I literally have pops of, and I tend to do a lot of loud exclamations that make everyone around me jump out of their skin, because I'll think of something and I'll be, oh my God. So they're always like, what? You know, everybody jumps up around and they're like, what's going on with you? So I would say that, and possibly also add on a little bit of a travel writing, travelogue kind of a genre, because I've lived in many places around India, and I love to travel. And it's something that it really is a big part of me. So I think a combination of the two.
Great. That sounds very exciting. That a combination of the two is also sounding like a great genre to be. All right. So next question is, what one fictional character you would like to befriend or have a nice long chat with, even if you don't want to be friends?
Okay.
Any.
I would really like to befriend Captain Coconut because he's so ridiculous. I think that I'll go with that.
Okay, great. Yeah. Last question is, so as a children's author, I know that a lot of the world doesn't take the profession very seriously. And so what is one of the most common reaction that you get, or the strangest reaction that you've gotten?
You can see my brain is exploding at that question. Okay, so I have had, I think, possibly the most annoying thing that someone says. There are two things. Okay, one of them is, "Acha, but when are you trying to write a book for adults? Like, ab to kafi saal bachcho ke liye likh liya." And I am like, okay, you just need to get out of my face right now, unfortunately. The other thing has happened is that there'll be somebody who's from a completely different profession, financial services, different things, right? They'll ask you, what do you do? And I say, I write books for children. I'm also thinking of writing a book for children.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm like, okay, fine. You know, I'm just going to leave it at that and not say much more. I can go on otherwise.
Right. I completely understand that emotion that you would feel in that moment. But all right, so we are going to go to some of the questions that are coming in. We have Shachi Manik who's asking, hi Natasha, we love your books. Which has been your favorite one to research, and how many more wonderful characters are you researching now?
Hi Shachi. My favorite one to research, very difficult to say. I have to say that the one that I'm not going to say the name out. Okay, that's still a bit of a surprise or a secret if I haven't let the cat out of the bag in all my Instagram posts. But the one that I'm researching now has possibly been my favorite because he's such a mad fellow. Of the 5 that you know, I would say I really got sucked into the research of Shah Jahan because it was so rich in the imagery of it all. And I didn't know, I mean, there was so much to include that I didn't know where to begin and where to end. So I just went on with the research, and I actually had to tell myself, okay, I need to put a hard stop to researching this character and get on with the writing at some point of time. So that was really interesting to research, I would say. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, you did. So we have Shivaji Biswas who says that he's having great fun listening to you, and these bits that were included in, I wish that these bits had been included in our history lessons. Not a question, but still championing the book. So that's.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So
and I know he's.
Yeah.
No, I said I realized he mentioned alliteration. It's somehow just been a part of the History Mystery series in the title, and then followed through in the book in the title of in the name of the group. Yeah.
All right. So we have Niranjana who says, could you give us a list of 5 of your favorite children's books? So you've given us 2 or 3. You've given us 3. If you have any more that you would have wanted to include.
Yes, of course. So I would say, and these are based largely on, sometimes on just things that I've read to my children, and I know that they've enjoyed a lot. There is this book by Tulika called Ismat's Eid, which had me in giggles every single time that I've read it. I can create a list of 15 books of Anushka, a list with Anushka's books,
Yes.
because pretty much every book has been a favorite, whether it's, in a novel format, a chapter book format like Moina and the Monster, or the younger picture books, like Catch That Crocodile and all of those. So I would say that, close your eyes and read her books at any point of time. I love many of Shabnam's books, Paro's books. I'm just finding it easier to say out the authors' names because I think that just comes top of mind. So Shabnam Minwala, Paro Anand, Payal Kapadia. She wrote this Horrid High series, which is a lot of fun. And Visha was a writer, so those are fun books as well. Many more, and I will not do justice when I'm thinking of it off the top of my head. But a lot of these authors, and I think internationally, because picture books are a great love of mine, my first love to write above anything else. International authors that I think are just amazing include Oliver Jeffers, Emily Gravitt. I love their books. And I think I get the humor, and that sort of resonates with me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we have Komal, who says, how do you come up with the interesting characters and their names?
So I think it's just a part of the process of writing. Once I have the character in my head, very often it could be some characteristic of that character, something that sort of fits. It's hard to put an exact process into it. In the Razia book, I wanted to do a particular thing where some of the names were based on the actual characteristics or the skills that that person was using. So there's a man who has very sharp hearing, and he sort of eavesdrops on conversations and picks up bits of information. So as a character, he has these very large ears that are protruding like this. So I gave him the name Khan Khan. And then there was another one who has this really long hair and he uses it as disguise. So his name is Zulfuddin. So, and actually this was a part of their nicknames when I was researching were actually based on some of these characteristics. So sometimes in the History Mystery series, at least there could sometimes be a historical perspective to it as well, which has inspired me to write a name like that.
All right. Great. So then we have a couple of more questions. We have time for a few more. Some you've already happened to have answered, so I'm not going to say those out. Okay, so we have Sanjaya, who says, these stories sound very exciting, and there are many things that happened in history that are considered inappropriate now, for example, violence, sexism. So how do you steer around these issues when you're writing?
Okay, so the way I look at it is I'm not writing a historical book, I'm writing historical fiction, and I'm also writing it for really young children. This is a series which is for children as young as 7 or 8 years old, 7 to 12, I would say. So I really don't particularly include any of those. It's a historical story, so I just choose to take one part of it. I choose to take a moment in time and weave a story around it. In the case of Shah Jahan, as an example, I took it as the moment of the inauguration of the Peacock Throne, and the story began from there. So I stay within, and I have a limited number of words when I'm writing for younger children. So I stay with that. But with the character that I've just written, the 6th book, he possibly could have given any medieval king in history a run for their money, where it comes with coming up with torture ideas, right? So just to give you an example, which is a more specific example, while he might be giving out punishments, I'm not going to write in the book for an 8-year-old that which he actually did, that he killed a guy, boiled him, and then fed the soup to the widow. I tell that to my husband at the dinner table and kill his appetite to help him stay on his diet. But I don't write this in the children's book. I will come up with a ridiculous, very torturous kind of a punishment, which could be counting the blades of grass and then counting it every day so it's just, you come up with crazy, very, very crazy, but you sort of navigate and steer your way through the madness that history can entail. This is just to give them a little sneak peek into a little bit of history, and hopefully when they're older, they go on to explore more, and then when they're old enough, they can read about all these horrors.
Horrors indeed. That sounds horrific. All right. So, okay. So this Pooja Lakshman, who says, do you recommend any picture book to read for a child with autism?
I'm not. I will say that I'm not possibly equipped to decide which would be the most appropriate book for that. But I would say that there are most picture books today which are well written, come up with a lot of wonderful the imagery and the words that are used and the connection of the two itself work really well. And some of them which are great read alouds, because most picture books are really the concept being that you can actually read aloud and listen to them. So I know that there are also a lot of audio books for these available today online. So those could possibly be books that could be looked at, like even including Karadi has such wonderful books that have been narrated with music and with all those elements in the background. So possibly some of those I would think. Yeah. But I'm not an authority on this, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, what you're saying is absolutely right. There is actually a lot of the picture books just are a pleasure to read for anyone in general. Yes. Across, I think they're just magic.
I think the mark of a good picture book is the one that even an adult enjoys when they're reading it to their child.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So one last question. We have... we have a couple. There's one last question. So what are some of the most, Kritika Nair says, what are some of the most obscure and bizarre facts that you have discovered during your research, and how do people react to it? You've already answered this, so I'm going to put in another questions which you haven't answered. Okay. Anupama Rajesh asks, any other genre that you plan to write in, and how about horror?
Oh, I will never write horror because I cannot even stand in a room where there is a horror movie going on. I can barely get myself to turn a page in a horror book. And I have actually been approached to write a short story in a horror compilation. And I actually told the editor that I really want to work with you, but I cannot write horror because I just am a complete scaredy cat. I did write Vikram and the Vampire, which is my take on Vikram and Betal, but I turned it into a funny book, and I stayed with the basic questions, but it is possibly a more woman empowered, funny version of Vikram and Betal that you would have ever read. So horror is unlikely. I do write across many genres in terms of just the age group. So I write picture books. I've written, retellings, like in the case of Vikram and the Vampire. So I like to play around, and possibly I'll try something, maybe a different age group at some point of time. Yeah, horror is unlikely.
Brings us to the end. I'm not sure. There's a bit of some technical glitch that happened suddenly. But thank you so much, Natasha. Thank you so much. I hope we've been able to answer all the questions. There were a bunch coming in at one point. But thank you so much. We are towards the end of our time. And this has been very exciting, talking about history in general. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Sanjana. And thank you to everyone who actually tuned in. I hope people were able to answer some of your questions and that you got something out of the session. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we will see you next week, same time, with a brand new author. Bye-bye.